seats. Welcome everyone. Councillors and visitors, please remember to switch your electronic devices to silent. We'll turn the live stream on and we welcome our viewers at home as well as our large crowd in the gallery. Thank you for coming along this evening. We'll start the meeting by asking you please to stand up, and Deputy Mayor Proud, could you please read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Councillor Kristovich, could you please read out the acknowledgement of country?
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect to elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can all take your seats. Thank you. Without prior approval, any recording of the meeting is prohibited. No action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. Brings us to item 1, which is the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 21st of March 2023 open at 6:31 p.m. Item 2, attendance and apologies. I have an apology from Councillor Felicity Farrelly and Councillor Lisa Thornton. Item 3, approved leave of absence. The current leaves of absence are Councillor Michael Dudek, who's been granted the leave of absence for the period 19th of March to the 23rd of March 2023 inclusive, and Councillor David Lagan granted the leave of absence for the period 22nd of March to the 29th of March 2023 inclusive. Item 4, disclosure of interest. Disclosures from the Planning and Development Committee meeting can be found in the agenda of tonight's meeting. They're also displayed on the screen behind me. For this evening's council meeting, councillors, are there any other disclosures you would like to note? Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking up the item. It's for a dare parade.
Thank you. That's 13.1. Thank you. And your interest?
I'm on JDUP.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest in 13.1 because I could possibly be on that JDUP.
All right. Thank you. Noted. Any other indications, councillors? If not, I'll move to... Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine will be more around an impartiality for 13.1 as I met with some of the residents.
Thank you. If you can all just make sure that paperwork's into governance, please. Brings to item 5, which is petitions. Item 5.1, there is a petition. I think Councillor Sandri is just running a little late, so I'll ask you, Councillor Lagan, if you could please table the petition from the Mount Lawley Golf Club.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the petition is the city has received the following petition containing 233 verified signatures, and I'll just read briefly what was on the petition. It reads, "We, the undersigned, do respectfully request that the council note that we fully support both the club board and club management of Mount Lawley Golf Club in the implementation of the club's vegetation management plan and the greens replacement program, and ask that council approve the vegetation management plan as soon as possible. We note that the vegetation management plan is aligned with the current City of Stirling vegetation policies and goals, and that there will be some necessary problematic tree removal to achieve those goals. We have no doubt that the full implementation of this plan and program will result in an increased canopy cover, a key objective of Council's urban forest plan, a much improved and valuable environment site and a better golf course."
Thank you very much. And 5.2, Councillor Kristovich, I think you've got a petition to table as well, if you'd like to read that out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a non-complying petition with 12 signatures to do with the removal of no parking signs on Pascoe Street in Karrinyup. And it says, "We, the undersigned, do respectively request that the council remove signs, no parking on Verge across the road."
Thank you. Councillors, are there any unverified petitions you'd like to present this evening? If not, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes? Move Councillor Reid, seconded Councillor Perkoff. And just a show of hands, councillors. Councillor Migdale, just need your hand up as well. Thank you. That is unanimous, noting that Councillor Sandri still isn't in the chamber for the vote. Thanks. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice, and the last public question time responses were published in the minutes of that meeting. This now brings us to item 7, public question time. Councillors and members of the gallery, we do have a significant number of questions for this evening. Many of them relate to item 13.1, Adair Parade. So I'll ask you, there are also some questions that we've received on that item, and the people have noted they're not attending this evening. So at the end of it, if I haven't called you out and you have attended, if you can just signal and put your hand up, and then we can get you up to ask a question. For those, and there might be viewers at home watching on this item, if they've sent a question in and they don't attend tonight, the question will still form part of the minutes of this meeting, and they will still be answered, and those will be published, so they'll still be on the public record. I will start by asking Rob Gearson, if you'd like to please come forward. Lucky first, and if you come up on the bottom right-hand corner of your microphone, if you press the silver button, and you'll see a red light come on, and that's it, and that can just stay on now. And if you'd like to start with your name and your suburb, and then your first question, please.
Certainly. My name's Rob Gearson. I am a resident of Manoora, and thanks to the members and chair for allowing us to speak tonight. Just as I get into my first question, I just want to put forward regarding Adair Parade development. Really believe this development has an obligation to ensure the impact
Sorry, just before, because I know there may be many people who are attending for the first time tonight. This is public question time, so I do have to ask you, whilst we allow very short preambles, they're not for statements, so if you can just ask questions of officers, please.
So I certainly acknowledge the detailed work of officers in assessing the proposal, but I just wish to raise the following. It was noted in the Responsible Authority report the various legislation and policies referenced whilst assessing the application. As a father of a child with a disability, I've noted council officers have not referenced disability access to premises, buildings, standards 2010, a standard that all new buildings nationally must comply with. There appear to be a number of access deficiencies, in particular common and public areas, such as hallways not meeting minimum widths and other matters the design does not comply. Including, I note the accessible parking bay, the one and only for this site, has been situated at the rear or service entrance to this building. And users of this bay have to enter through the rear of the building, shop entrances, or required to utilise a lift that also provides access for the bin and rubbish removal to overcome an unnecessary 900mm floor height differential.
Thanks, and again, sir, I just have to ask you if you can get to a question, please.
So I'd like to ask, will the city seek to evaluate the design against the Disability and Discrimination Act regarding universal access and to ensure the design is meeting or exceeding all its obligations under the Act? To ensure community members using wheelchairs, walkers or other mobility devices are fully considered and can access the building appropriately and with dignity.
Thank you. Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your question, Mr Gearson. The City's Responsible Authority report is a planning report, so it primarily deals with planning assessment. The matters that you've raised are incredibly important and they still need to be addressed. That process is handled through the building application process, where we have a private building surveyor who would then do that assessment. They're obligated to still comply with those requirements, such as the Disability Standards 2010 that you reference, and also National Construction Codes and any other applicable requirements.
Thank you. Your next question.
The City has considered the impact of the increased use of Clem Lane and the reports associated with that and required a 6 metre condition for widening of that laneway. But neither the City or the Shawmac reports considered the increase in traffic that will utilise the associated feeder lane from Clem Lane, that being Canwick Lane, which provides a direct entry and exit to the development's car park. It's not currently a significant issue with the current traffic load. However, increased traffic must be considered and planned for. So will Council, as part of this development, seek to take into account and, if required, upgrade or alter the traffic flow of Canwick Lane, particularly as this is only a 3.9 metre width laneway?
Thank you. Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Gearson. As part of the City's assessment, they did look at what would be the most direct or logical route to this particular site. It was considered that access to the development would primarily be through Lanark Street or Walcott Street and then Clem Lane, and therefore any impact on Kenwick Lane would not be significant. We acknowledge that it isn't at the full width that it's planned to be, so it's an ROW1, which means there is a scheduled plan of upgrade for that laneway, and as developments come on board through there, those developments will be required to cede some land as well to bring that up to standard. It is considered, though, that the current width of that, which is just over 5 metres road reserve through the laneway at the moment, is sufficient to allow the safe passing of vehicles. There is enough area for those vehicles to navigate through there safely.
Thank you. And your third question, please.
I note the lack of on-site parking is identified as one of the two reasons the City recommends the proposal be rejected. And whilst the RA recommends that, very conscious that the final decision rests with JDAP and not the City of Stirling. So should the undesirable outcome occur and JDAP decide to pass this development as is, which may occur, will Council take all actions available to it to explore alternative remedies, including potentially acquiring land, ceding land, or any other means available to ensure the parking issues in and around the area can be accommodated in some way?
Thank you. Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Gearson. In scenarios like this where the City is recommending refusal, should JDAP be of a mind to approve it and development gets constructed, the City will take on board any feedback that it receives from residents or businesses in the area. If there is a complaint or an issue with parking, that will be looked at that stage, and then what alternatives or options to manage that issue will be addressed at that stage. Whilst we acknowledge there is the potential for some overflow car parking as a result of this development, we do have our local law that does prohibit some parking on verges, and so that would be needing to be raised with the City at that time.
Thank you for your questions. Sean Pearson. Good evening, and just start with your name and suburb.
Evening, my name's Sean Pearson from Manoora. My first question, it's also addressing the Adair Crescent development as proposed. The Council's approved development at Clifton Street, Mount Lawley. This development is approximately 50% of the size of the proposed Adair Parade proposal. Since completion of that development, the City Council has been allocating a lot of resources to deal with the parking and traffic congestion issues at Clifton Crescent, and most notably in the February minutes, it was noted as being unbudgeted, the solutions that are being proposed. My question is, Adair Parade is a very busy street, and accessing it will be through associated with the proposal on Adair Crescent. What against the Clifton Crescent experience has the City changed in their assessment process to ensure similar issues are not experienced at Adair Crescent?
Thank you. Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Pearson, for the question. That particular development on Clifton Crescent and Central was approved by the JDAP, notwithstanding the City's recommendation for refusal. That was recommended for refusal for a number of reasons, including the lack of adequate parking, access and manoeuvring. So the two are slightly different, although there are some similarities. The proposed development that's on tonight's agenda that Council are considering identifies a car parking shortfall that's also not supported. In relation to the traffic congestion impacts, our engineers have looked at the proposal and the information submitted by the applicant and are satisfied the existing road network can cope with the increase in traffic.
Thank you. Your next question, please.
Through the feedback process, the City Council received 263 unique comments in their submissions regarding to the non-compliant building height, bulk and form. Just as an aside, there was 263 comments. They were broken into 11 different matters, so they were sort of separated out in the response, but by far the biggest response people were asking for feedback on was building height and form. In determining to recommend a non-compliant building height of 5 stories against the residential R60 and LP S3 limit of 3, the Council refers significantly to approval given to a 5-storey development of Walcott Street and Leroy as a neighbourhood centre on an activity centre. I think I've got that right. Why doesn't the report consider compliant building heights on a similar situation with the City Council. And it only refers to a non-compliant example.
Thank you. Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Pearson. The city's RAR goes through an assessment process and it does consider all the submission responses that we received. Through that analysis and assessment, officers look at the proposed development in relation to its context. As stepped out and through the RAR, we've got an analysis in there in terms of the existing streetscape, which acknowledges the single and double storey and 3-storey buildings that are already in the locality. And it also talks about the future intent, particularly on the opposite side of Walcott Street. We do undertake a detailed assessment in terms of building heights, and this particular one, in relation to the reference to that other development you're talking about, that reference to the development that was approved on Walcott wasn't necessarily talking about it as a justification for this proposal. In the report, it talks about it acknowledging that it doesn't justify the height for this development, but it more provides an example of how this height of development can be located in an area with a lower height buildings around it.
So my third question is a follow-up from that is, if that's the case, why wasn't other compliant areas considered and referenced as part of the report?
Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it was in the analysis. You'll read through the RAR and it talks about the areas adjoining the site being 2 storeys, 3 storeys and 1 storey around the subject site. It talks about the transition in height from 5 storeys on Walcott down to 2 storeys towards the other end of the site.
Thank you, sir, for your questions.
Thank you.
Katia Defendi? Thank you, and just your name and suburb, please.
Thank you all. My name is Katia Defendi. I'm from Coolbinia. My question to Council is, based on previous instances when Council has recommended refusal of proposed development but JDAP has approved it, how is Council ensuring improved and more equitable representation of its current ratepayers' voices and needs at JDAP proceedings?
Thank you. Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Defendi, for the question. It's a tricky question. We can't have any influence at this stage over the JDAP process. However, when the state government is proposing any reforms or any changes to that process, the city often will always advocate strongly for inclusion in that process. At the moment, 2 elected members are still part of that panel, and the city supports that position.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Belinda Sadell?
My name is Belinda Seidel from North Perth. Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is to the panel, could you please explain how the height scale of the development can be supported when it not only exceeds the 3-storey limit on builds in that zone, but will impact residents' privacy in neighbouring lots and increase the noise to unacceptable levels?
Thank you for that question. I'll get Ms Shears to answer. I do want to note, though, the committee recommendation or the council recommendation tonight from officers is the RAR recommending refusal. So obviously it'll then go to the panel. Ms Shears?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Ms Sadell. The West Australian Planning Framework is primarily performance-based, which means that it provides an opportunity for applicants to put forward alternate design solutions or variations, such as this development is proposing a variation to the building height that you're talking about. However, when developments or proposals are looking to do such variations, it's important that they are still, or they still do satisfy the relevant criteria that we assess them against. In this instance, it's the element objectives of what we call the R codes. The City's officers' assessment against the R codes, we were satisfied it still met that overall objective. Equally, with our local planning policy, it states you can vary the height through a local development plan, addressing the objectives. This proposal didn't seek to do that through a local development plan, but still met the objectives of the LPP 4.2, which relates to this site. We do assess things like overlooking and privacy, and in our assessment, we were satisfied that it met those requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have just reached time on public question time, so I will rule to extend public question time to allow the other questions. and I'll invite Julianne Poland if you'd like to come forward. Thank you, and just your name and suburb to start.
Julianne Poland from Menora. Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors. My first question is, a portion of the 5 stories, apartment 2.02 and 2.01 along Clem Lane, about a residential R10, part of the city's heritage protection area. The 5 stories along this portion of Clem Lane also include a basement, so from this perspective, it's actually viewed as 6 stories. As a result, the height of the building and its bulk and scale from the perspective of the adjoining residential R10 single storey currently, and visibly along Lanark Street behind the heritage protection bungalows, does not respond to the desired future character, scale or bulk of these properties and streetscapes. Therefore, how can this portion of the building be considered to address SPP 7.3 element objective 2.2.1 and the design intent of LPP 4.2?
Thank you, Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Ms Poland. This particular site has a different zoning and density and built form provisions that apply to it, as opposed to the residential area that you're referring to. As part of our consideration, though, we do look at those transitions and how that building interacts with that area. In relation to Clem Lane, the development transitions down from the five stories at Walcott Street down to the 2 stories on the northeastern boundary to ensure that it's a bit more consistent with that 2-story built form that's existing. That portion of this site actually has a 3-story height limit that applies to it, so it's proposed to be below what is envisaged for that part of the site. We believe that the site has adequate separation from those areas that are R10 in the heritage area, and that we're satisfied with the design.
Thank you.
The building height is measured from the higher Adair Parade and not the step down towards the lower Clem Lane. So therefore, how does it satisfy the element design objective 2.2.2? The height of buildings within a development respond to changes in topography?
Thank you, Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. The City's officer's assessment concluded it does respond to the topography and also the zoning that it has over the site, with the higher portion of the building located on the corner at Walcott Street and then transitioning down to the 2 stories.
Thank you.
The report refers to a similar development along Walcott Street that was approved by JDAP that has 5 stories. This development only contains 9 dwellings and is 5 stories high on Walcott, but then follows the topography of the land and reduces to 3 stories at the rear, where it abuts existing residential houses. It does not have any balconies or windows facing or overlooking any adjoining properties. In fact, one side has what looks to be a parapet wall. Why aren't you making the Adair Parade development follow the topography of the land from Adair down to Clem Lane, in line with the existing surrounding buildings and in line with the Leroy Street development, since you're using that as an example? And therefore, how does a proposal which requires so many variations not undermine the planning framework for this area?
Thank you, Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. That particular development, that site has a significant amount of slope across it, so you drive right up that hill, and it does, yep, you're correctly depicted that, it does transition up the hill. This site has some crossfall, but it doesn't have the significant slope that that particular site that you're referring to has. That particular site also is triangular in shape. It's very unusual, and it required a very different design outcome. We refer in the report that each application is assessed on its own merits, and this particular application that's on the agenda tonight, in the consideration by the officers, it was considered it was appropriate for its context and location, and it has good separation from the area around it.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Phil Tarker. Good evening, your name and your suburb, please.
Philip Tarker, Coolbinia resident. Live within 300 metres of the proposed development. Is the council aware that on-street parking on Adair Parade close to Walcott Street and the public bays on the corner of Ardross Crescent and Walcott Street are mostly occupied by the existing businesses and residents, noting that 3 of the shops on Walcott Street are currently vacant.
Yes, we certainly are. The city is certainly aware that the existing informal and formal parking that occurs in that area in the locality is utilised by the existing businesses.
Is the council also aware that on event days and nights, the existing shops and businesses fill up the above parking, and the overflow parking comes up to our streets and our verges, so it's pushed into the surrounding streets?
Yes, the city is aware of that.
How will the council ensure the developer complies with the parking requirements in LPP 6.7 and the relevant car parking R codes, so as not to rely on or allow use of the existing public bays, neighbourhood streets and our verges for parking shortfall in this development?
Thank you. Ms Hughes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Tarker. As outlined in the city's RAR, car parking is one of our big concerns with this proposal, and we do have concerns that there isn't sufficient visitor parking, which is why we have recommended refusal. Should JDAP decide that they do want to approve this development, the city would seek to put forward some conditions for the JDAP's consideration about the allocation of those car parks in this building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deirdre Allen. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello. I'm Deirdre Allen of Corbinia. I don't understand this. Why should a developer submit a very detailed, expensive set of drawings showing a building with 5 stories above the ground when the planning requirements for this location only allow 3 stories above the ground? We've heard other things, but keep it simple. These are the rules. 3 stories. It seems illogical. I believe it should be immediately rejected by the council on this basis and advised to JDAP, and no point even being discussed further. Does the developer know something we don't know? They spent all this money, like it will be accepted. And look, if I could just add, 3 stories might solve all the parking problems, because they'll definitely have enough on the ground level parking they have at the moment.
Thank you for that question. Look, and as you're probably aware, the council is not the decision maker in this
process.
Yeah, but I will get Ms Hughes to provide some comment.
Yes.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Allen, for the question. 3 stories isn't the limit. So when I was referring to before about the performance-based planning framework that we have, it's a trigger in a way. So essentially our planning framework allows anyone to put forward some variations, provided that they still meet the intent of the objectives or the performance criteria. So in this instance, they've put forward something that's more than the 3 stories, which they are entitled to do. They've also sought other variations, which again, they are entitled to do under our legislation for planning. Officers assess that, and when there is no impact in terms of adverse impact on adjoining property owners and things like that, the
5
development
stories.
can be supported.
It's going to be adverse. Okay, my second question is about the advertising hoarding that went up suddenly. I understand that it didn't have permission from council to be put up for selling the development, showing 5 stories and the pretty pictures again. Now we'll find it quite amusing. It's now been artistically graffitied quite extensively, very quickly, with black tags all over it, and it's become an eyesore. Why hasn't it been ordered to be taken down? And is it going to be taken down? Because it doesn't look good anymore.
Thank you for that. And look, it's not uncommon, but the city is certainly now aware of the matter and it's under investigation by the city. However, the city has recently now received an application for the sign.
Thank you, Mayor. And I had a PS, but not to worry about that. And even though Perth has been identified as having the lowest tree cover of all capital cities recently, we've heard it in the media, This development has hardly any room for any major trees on the site. It nearly covers all the site. It also refers to the jacarandas as though they're jacarandas, but they in fact they are to the city of Stirling. They're verge trees, and they are located on the current verge. The canopy is shown on the plan, and the roots of these existing large trees will overlap the building footprint and be lucky to survive. If you have to replace them, they die, it will take many years for these fabulous trees to grow again and reach the same size. I know council care very much for their verge trees, and how is the height and the closeness of the building density being permitted, because it could affect the existing trees.
Thank you for that. And certainly there's no trees that are being proposed to be removed, specifically the verge trees in this development application. As per any of these applications, the verge trees would be required to have their tree protection zone put in.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple of new verge trees that are proposed as part of this application, but I would also suggest that the drawings aren't an accurate representation of the canopy cover of those trees or where they are.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. They seem to be quite large. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ashley Morrison. Thank you. Just your name and suburb too, please.
Yeah, Ashley Morrison, Coolbinia. I'm going to apologise because I'm going to repeat some of what people have already said, but I believe as council your job is to plan for the future, and if this building does go ahead, I worry that you will now set a precedent that other builders can come in and go over the 3-storey height. I'd like to know what you're going to do to make sure that that isn't the case, although I know Miss Hughes said that there are obviously allowances for people to go over that. But I think we need to protect where we live, and I'd like to know what the council is going to do to make sure that this doesn't set a precedent.
Thank you for that question. Ms Shears.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Morrison. You're correct. Each application is assessed case by case, and there is the possibility that they can put forward something alternative to what council envisaged for a site. Through that assessment, we can't prohibit that from occurring. All we can do is ensure that our planning framework is robust in terms of outlining the exact intent and framework that we would like to see for an area, and thoroughly assess any potential impacts like overshadowing and things like that. For the height for this particular development, the height was considered sufficient from officers' assessment. However, the refusal is recommended for a number of other reasons, which are outlined in the RAR. The JDAP, as the decision maker, will have the final say on this application, but it's a very important process that council do that, city does that thorough assessment up front.
Thank you. And your next question?
Yeah, following on from Mr Tarker's comments, I'd like to ask again, looking forward, if this does get approved, and again, reading your document that you sent out, you're saying that the shops underneath are going to provide for daily, weekly household shopping needs, community facilities and a small range of convenience services for the catchment. You don't actually know that, so I don't think that should have actually been in there, because until those are rented out. But that's by the by. Again, going back to the parking issue, what are you going to do to resolve this if this gets through JDAP and we do not have enough parking? Because as Mr Tarker said, the gym at the moment, they're now parking in all the outlying streets. What are you going to do? Are you going to introduce a residence parking permits so that we prevent this? I want to know what the council is going to do to address this down the track if it should happen.
So thank you for that question. And, you know, as you've probably read in the report, one of the main reasons, the most significant reasons for the RAR recommending refusal on this is a parking shortfall on that site. If it was to be approved through a JDAP process, then council would put as many conditions on to mitigate those issues as they could. But then we would, in essence, in the future, have to deal with those issues.
Do you
and
share those with us now? Because obviously you must be thinking about that in case it gets through, because that's good governance.
No, well, let's not deal in hypotheticals, but certainly it'll go through a rigorous planning process, sir.
Wow, that's a very different style of governance from what I'm used to.
I'm sorry, sir, but you're asking us to predicate something that hasn't happened yet. We're not the decision maker. It will go through a JDAP decision-making process.
It's called planning.
Your next question.
Yeah. Finally, again, which was touched on by Miss Allen, to me, the obvious solution to all of the issues that are raised and the things that even the council has concerns about is to reduce the size. You reduce the size, you don't have the height issues, and we know that the only reason it wants to go to 5 stories is so it gets city views so they can get maximum dollar on the sales. And it also would reduce the parking problem. So I don't know why the council isn't recommending that a downsizing, because it would save a lot of time and also...
Thank you for that question. Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor. As outlined before, Mr Morrison, it's assessed on its merits and case by case. Where there is merit for an application to seek additional variations for something, provided it still meets the objectives or the higher order parts of our planning framework, officers can support it. In this instance, the height was considered thoroughly and detailed in their analysis, and it was determined that there wasn't any overshadowing or privacy issues. There are...
Excuse me, everyone, please.
That won't be the case in all instances for sites. This site is also a local centre and it's on an identified activity corridor. Our strategic planning framework also talks about this is exactly where the city wants additional height, density and jobs, and this is what this proposal has.
Thank you for your question, sir. Miles Harmer. Thank you. Your name and suburb?
Hello, Miles Harmer, Mount Lawley. My questions again relate to this Adair and Walcott Street, but my questions relate actually not to that, but to the actual quality of the reporting impact statement that Showmac, the consulting civil and traffic engineers. Okay. Question 1. In this report on page 8, Showmac claims that 12 street parking bays can be developed adjacent to the development. 12 parking bays, it's drawn around it. Right, 3 of those parking bays are on Walcott Street, and these cannot be claimed because Walcott Street is a clearway in the mornings. Oh, there you go. And the 9 parking bays on Adair cannot be claimed because this is a no standing zone. Does this information in the Shawmax report meet the standards of professionalism and integrity that City and Council, and I suppose JDAP, accept?
Thank you. Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Harmer, for the question. The City's assessment of that particular report didn't support the use of those bays on those streets. It's not appropriate for a development to rely on on-street car parking that is provided for an entire area. That's why we're recommending refusal for this development, because of the allocation of bays within the site.
Thank you. Your next question?
My question was about the report and the integrity of the report. Okay. Question 2. If parking were permitted on Adair Street, the shading on the illustration on page 203 of the agenda indicates that 9 parking bays could be located on Adair Street. That's on the plan, 9 parking bays. In fact, the shaded area is illustrated is only 37 metres long, which is only large enough for 6 parking bays. And even then, the traffic in Adair would have to cross the white section to pass, so it wouldn't be allowed. So I know that you're rejecting it, but how come these people are putting in this report? Sorry, back to the question. How does the information in the Shawmac report meet the standards of professionalism and integrity that the city should expect?
Thank you. Ms Hughes?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Harmer. Our traffic engineers review these types of reports that come through. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I can't speak for the professionalism or the integrity of their reporting. However, that particular issue wasn't raised with us. Rather, the actual non-support of what they were proposing was put to us from our traffic engineers.
Okay. Just aside, I think you see, you can have errors in omissions in a report, but if you have a deliberate error, that's a lie, and if you have a deliberate omission, that's misleading. My third question. My third question is about the junction between Clem Lane, which, let's face it, is going to be a road in all but name, and Walcott. Okay. So there's an existing commercial building shown in the minutes on page 203, and it can be seen to occupy the whole of the corner of the east side of the junction of Clem Street and Walcott Street. And there's no footpath on the building side of Clem Street. So I'm driving down Clem Street. There's a building all the way here, right up to the pavement. Okay, the pavement's there. Right, pedestrians heading along along Walcott Street will literally have to stop and peer round this corner, and the child on the bike could easily be under the wheels of the car by then. You know, splat. And the other part is that drivers driving out of Clem Street, so driving out of Clem Street like this, and heading west, will have their visibility blocked by the cars in the proposed parking bays on Walcott Street. So they'll look here, they'll see a car, and there's cars behind that travelling at 80 kilometres an hour. This poses a risk that they may be hit on the driver's side by a vehicle travelling down Walcott Street at 80 kilometres an hour. Surely these are unacceptable risks to pedestrians and drivers. And as professionals, shouldn't Shawmac have included these risks in their report to Council and to JDAP?
Thank you. Ms Shears.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Harmer. You're correct. That's part of the reason why we weren't supportive of those bays in that location, is because of the visibility issues that would bring. With regards to the safety along Clem Lane, there is a speed bump in Clem Lane currently. It's proposed that that be relocated and repositioned to ensure that that provides a safe environment through there.
Shouldn't you have a 2x2 cut-off?
Thank you, Mr Harmer.
Okay.
I will now...
Thank you.
Thank you. We've reached the second time frame. So I will rule to extend question time again. Invite Philip Smith if you'd like to come forward.
My name is Philip Smith. I'm a resident of Scarborough. First question relates to 13.1, and the question that I ask is, now that the matter is before JDAP, does the question to the council really mean anything? The council has lots of arguments with JDAP and lots of disagreements with JDAP, and yet JDAP's always come through.
Thank you. Look, they don't always come through, but you're right, and you know you would have all seen a fair bit of media recently around state government reforms on planning. Essentially, the council in this has a role here to put a responsible authority report on planning issues to JDAP, who are the decision maker. The reality is, by attending council, what you do have is a chance to ask questions and let council know how you feel about this development, and that's still an important part of the process. But that doesn't stop there. You still have the opportunity to go to JDAP and voice your concerns.
Perhaps giving state government absolute majority is not a good thing. My second question, changing the subject totally, is I refer to real estate agents' street signs. I'm noticing, particularly in the coastal ward, that street signs are on street verges more often than not. Driving here to the council, like Pearl Parade, Sackville Terrace, Barn Street. My local councillors have been very helpful. Monica Creek has been helpful, but Luke Goulding at the City of Stirling seems to think that the problem can't be solved. I believe that if you simply went to the sign companies and told the sign companies that they're out of bounds, and if they did it again, they would be under suspicion. So I think, is there anything that we can do about real estate agents' signs being on street verges?
Yes, there certainly is, Mr Smith, and what we do find from time to time, they sort of escalate over a period of time. We certainly don't instruct the city officers or rangers to be proactive in that space. They've obviously got a few other criteria they follow with that, but once we get some complaints in and we start to see those A-frames on roundabouts and the actual real estate signs on verges, we're happy to act and we're happy to take those addresses, and Mr Mullins is here and is listening and happy to have a look at those.
These signs mainly are the fixed for sale signs,
yeah,
not
the significant ones.
the directional signs.
I understand. We're happy to get those sites off you too, Mr Smith.
Thank you very much.
Now, I have got other questions. On my list, we finished on 13.1, but just in the interest of, we're on the same subject. If someone is here for 13.1, if you'd like to, Mr. Collins. Keep the flow going. Your name
thank you,
and suburb.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that. My name is Paul Collins. I'm from Dianella. I lived in Coolbinia for 10 years. Still own property in Coolbinia. this report is of significant concern to me. I ask councillors to turn their attention to the recommendation before you tonight. It asks you to endorse this report. That is the last thing I ask you to do tonight. Do not endorse this report. This report, Mr Mayor, says that we have an overheight, an overbulked and an underparked development on a very busy corner in a largely heritage protection area zoned R10. It's overheight by 5 stories to 3 stories, or 19.5 metres to 12.5 metres, and it's overbulked by more than 100%, from 0.91 to 1.93. But oh no, let's endorse that tonight, councillors. Endorse that. Tell DAP you're happy with that. But we're just 14 car bays short on the commercial.
Good. Thanks, Mr Collins, but question.
And we're just 6 car bays short on the residential.
Question.
We love the overheight. We love the overbulk. We couldn't be happier.
Mr Collins, could you please ask us a question?
Why isn't there an alternative recommendation that makes logical sense?
Thank you for that question. That matter is before council tonight, and council will make that determination. I will get Ms Shears to provide some comment on your comments, though, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Collins. As outlined in the RAR, which is quite extensive, so there's 65 pages that go through the officer's assessment. As I've outlined previously, each application is assessed on its own merit. This won't be a situation in that it's applicable to every site in the city, but where sites do have merit and there isn't significant impact, or those impacts can be appropriately managed, the city feels it's appropriate to support those aspects. The refusal reasons doesn't just relate to car parking, also relates to some serious safety concerns around the waste and refuse collection and loading for the site. It's considered those issues aren't surmountable via condition and that they need redesigning. They're the main reasons why we refuse the application.
Thank you, Mr Collins.
Mr Mayor, I understand what R60 means. I understand what a local centre means and that it's zoned R80. And I understand that the height is 3 stories. And I understand how an applicant can work with the element objectives to get as high as they want. And as was mentioned earlier by your planning officer, Mr Mayor, there is no limit. Well, if we look at that objective, the objective says that the height of the development responds to the desired future scale and character of the street and local area, including existing buildings that are unlikely to change. So if you look at that objective, how did the planning officers, based on hundreds of submissions, telling them what the desired future scale and character and height for the area that was wanted, how did they then come up with a different desired future scale and character for the area?
Thank you. Ms Shears?
Do you understand my gist? Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Collins. That particular element criteria that you talked about talks about responding. It doesn't say it has to be exactly the same. A response can be achieved in many ways. On the opposite side of Walcott Street, which is not part of the City of Stirling, but that side of the Walcott Street is 4 stories. This proposal has 5 stories on the opposite side. So directly opposite, there'll be potentially 5 stories. It steps down then down to 2 stories in what is currently permitted to be 3 stories. That is an appropriate response to the existing and future character for the area.
So,
and your third question, Mr Collins.
Well, I don't want to waste a question, but okay. I have a problem with this endorsement, but hopefully the councillors have got some sense to come up with an alternative recommendations. But the third question is, so it's over height, significantly, it does somehow respond to all of the desires and wishes that the residents would like to see for the character for the area, and it's overbulk. No, but that's what the element objective says. Isn't it really true that what this report is saying and what you're endorsing is that you're endorsing effectively an R100 to R160 development, but doing so and saying, well, yep, we allow an R100 to R160 development, but we only require an R60 parking requirement. Isn't that the true assessment here?
Ms Shears.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Mr Collins, that's not quite correct. You can't unlink the two. So essentially what we're talking about is a built form outcome that's appropriate to the zone, which is local centre. The car parking issue is separate, and if you look at the plans, there's the two different basement accesses, and they've located essentially only 8 visitor bays that will be utilised by residents and the commercial. The city's concern primarily relates to the allocation of those bays across the development.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Collins. And that's... Yes, he did do a good job. Is there anyone else for item 13.1 before I move on? If not, I'll go on to those other questions this evening, and I'll ask Lynn Eames Springham if you'd like to come forward, please. Thank you. Just your name and suburb.
Lynn Eames Springham from Jundana. Good evening, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors, staff and gallery. My questions this evening are regarding the Mount Lawley trees, not the Adair Parade situation. The last council meeting, the Director of Infrastructure confirmed that only 12 of the 69 trees cut down on the Mount Lawley Golf Course had been approved by the Manager of Parks and Sustainability. Does that mean Mount Lawley Golf Club have cut down 57 trees without permission by the City of Stirling? And if so, what were the actions taken by the City and what were the consequences?
Thank you. Mr Murphy.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. And thank you for the question. It is our understanding that some trees in the past were removed without formal approval being granted, which is a matter that the city's taken up with the club. Now, the requirement to seek formal approval before any trees are removed has been very clear, and we now have a proper process, so we've established that process.
I'm sorry, Mr Murphy, I think it's my advancing years. I can barely hear you.
Yeah, if I can ask you, Mr Murphy, just to maybe bring it a bit closer.
I move the microphone a bit closer?
It is sounding a bit.
Thank you.
People usually tell me to talk a bit
Oh, that's
quieter.
much better.
So I'll talk
Sorry.
Okay. So it is my understanding that some trees in the past were removed without formal approval being granted, and that's a matter that we've taken up in the strongest terms with the club. The requirement to seek formal approval before any trees are removed in the future has been made clear, and a proper process has now been established. And this can be clearly seen in the way that we're moving forward with the club through the recently submitted vegetation management plan.
Thank you, Mr Murphy. There has been significant tree removals and clearing on the Mount Lawley Golf Course. A clearing permit was required for the vegetation that was removed to put in the 19th hole. Has the city overseen and or assessed the subsequent clearing that has taken place? Was the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations consulted and permits given?
Thank you. Mr Murphy.
Yes, through Mr Mayor. Under the Environment Protection Act, native vegetation does not include vegetation that's intentionally sown, planted or propagated. Now, the trees removed that you refer to by the Mount Lawley Golf Club were planted by the club and or were non-native tree species, so they do not require a permit from state government to remove them.
Thank you. Has the City of Stirling consulted with the relevant state government departments to obtain approval and support for the City of Stirling's officers' report recommending the removal of over 40 trees on this A-class reserve, which is supposed to have a higher level of protection because of its A-class classification under the Lands Administrations Act?
So the simple answer is no. So no consultation is required.
Okay, thank you very much.
So we'll give you the long answer in writing.
Thank
of
you.
the acts. Yeah, thank you. Ariane Bradley.
Hi.
Welcome.
Ariane Bradley from Balcatta. There is in place prohibited cat areas within the City of Stirling. This weekend at the Lake Gwelup Reserve, that a couple of the councillors attended in the watering of the plants, I learnt from some of the volunteers that domestic cats are roaming freely around the reserve, and it doesn't sound like much has been done about this problem by the City of Stirling. Can the councillors that volunteered at this event please tell us what they are going to be doing about this problem, and have they started to look up at any solutions of making sure that our wildlife is kept safe?
Thank you for that. You'd have to ask the councillors outside of council if you'd like a response.
Sorry, I wasn't too sure.
No, that's all right, and they'll be
Yeah.
happy to provide you a response, I'm sure. But I will get Mr. Quirk to provide you a city response on it.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the question. Yes, look, certainly our rangers and our natural areas teams are aware that there are cats getting into those prohibited areas. So reporting incidents, whether it be directly through our rangers services or through the ward councillors, is certainly appreciated. It is a difficult issue to get on top of. As you're aware, the local law review is a big part of the solution, but continued reporting by the community to the city is essential as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Simon Wheeler, if you'd like to come up.
Sorry, Simon's had to leave.
Oh. Peter Ellis. That brings you forward. I knew you wouldn't leave on us, Mr. Ellis.
Of course not, Mr. Mayor, you know that. Good evening, my name's Peter Ellis from Careen. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff and fellow ratepayers. If the City of Stirling Body Corporate is the name of the council entity and employs Mr. Jardine, does that include the ratepayers as members? Thank you. Okay.
Well, that's an interesting question. We'll respond to you in writing, Mr. Ellis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. May I refer to answer to a council meeting the 7th of March, which state verbatim in relation to the CEO's 11 trips to conferences in America. The City cannot require the CEO to provide his reports to the public, as he is under no contractual obligation to do so. So how does this meet the signed statement on page 12 of the annual report 21-22 by Stuart Jardine, PSM, which states under the heading, Our Values, Transparent, and actually being transparent for all to see?
Thank you for that, Mr. Ellis.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor.
We'll respond to you in writing.
Fantastic. On page 24 of the annual report 21-22, it states verbatim, the role of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and elected members is to liaise with the CEO and administration on the performance of the city's functions, end verbatim. So how do you direct the CEO and administration to carry out the council instructions? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors?
That's under the Act, Mr. Ellis.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
It's one of our only roles, to get the CEO to run the city.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
you,
much.
Mr. Ellis. Goya Zhang. Thank you.
Sorry, my initial question was already sort of answered, if I can just adjust it slightly. So Goya Zhang, Kulbinia, it is in regards to a dare parade, so I apologise for circling
Now
back.
we're out of order.
Yes, I know, I'm sorry.
Keep going. That's all.
Essentially, my question is, so obviously the sign in question, the billboard, I should say, went up on the 1st of March. It has now taken more than 20 days for an investigation. Why does it take this long to investigate a sign that went up without council approval, and the approval has now been put forward by the developers? So how do we then stop this from remaining up at this stage?
Thank you for that question. Look, the simple answer is it's certainly not a priority of the city to restrict developers having signs up promoting their development if they're in tune with what should be up there. I know they're never pleasant when you've got a development happening in your area, but I'll get Ms. Shears to answer the questions on this particular sign.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. So when we receive a complaint, the officers, which this one was received on the 1st of March, I believe, officers were out on site on the 2nd of March, and we issued a letter that day to the developer or owner of the site, asking them to remove the sign rather. They chose to lodge a development application, which they are entitled to do. Now that an application has been submitted, that compliance investigation essentially, for lack of a better word, gets put on hold and pending the outcome of that application assessment. So there is no ability for the city to enforce removal of that sign at this stage.
Would that be the same as, just sorry, a follow-up question, if it was a residential matter rather than a developer matter?
Yeah, and again, I can honestly say that the last thing the community would want us to do every time we get a complaint about whether it be a sign or a residential property, if someone does something, the team certainly don't go in there and instruct them to remove it immediately. We deal with, think of retaining walls, anything like that. Normally you deal with it in a pragmatic way and instruct the person that it's unauthorised and they have the right to either remove it or put in a retrospective development application.
Thank you.
It would be a lot of resources to use when the sign would potentially then just go back up in the next week. So it's important it's worked through. If- Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Leisha Jack. Thank you, Ms Jack.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, staff. I have one question pertaining to the Mount Lawley, Karrinyup. I live in Karrinyup, Leisha Jack, Karrinyup.
Yeah, thanks.
Mount Lawley Golf Club tree removal on public land. Back in March 2022, the city put out a media release saying that, which is what the petition said also, that the density, the percentage of tree canopy would be greater with the current proposal, vegetation management proposal that the club is proposing. But as we all know, tree canopy can mean anything over 3 metres in height. So can we, you know, the city itself acknowledges, you acknowledge that tall trees provide the most benefits, and it's not just about, it's about cooling around, surrounding areas and all sorts of things in terms of the urban heat island effect, and tall trees actually have the most benefits. So can you assure us that the density of the canopy will remain the same height, or is it going to be a higher percentage of canopy at a lower level?
Thank you for that question. I think I understand it. And
Sorry, didn't sleep last night much.
No, that's all right. And look, I think firstly, let's also acknowledge there's been a significant canopy increase at all heights on that golf course over the last number of years. As part of the last resolution of council, the Mount Lawley Golf Club will be submitting their tree vegetation plan to council for endorsement, and that will also refer to the City of Stirling's tree policies, which outline those items you're talking to. So there is a value in the tree, and it's valued at a higher canopy, and there's no intent for the city to authorise taking large trees out for the sake of taking a large tree out. Does that help you?
Not really, but anyway. I just want to know if the canopy increase will be a lower level than what it is now, but you'll need to look at that.
We'll have to provide you a response in writing.
Yep. My next question is about childcare centres, and I just wanted to ask the question, are councillors, and I'm sure you are, aware that nature play, etc., and how important trees and nature are for children in learning and childcare centres? Studies have proven that they have a very significant effect on calming children, making them happier and increase their ability to learn. So I'm really hoping that the city will make sure that childcare centres in the city are not sterile environments with fake turf and artificial shade structures, but rather natural environments. I mean, we're building, hopefully, the question is, are we building, planning for childcare centres for children or for developers?
Yes.
That's the question.
Yeah, thank you for those questions, and the city certainly acknowledges that, and I think you'll read in the report, it actually refers specifically to artificial turf and the fact that it's not included in the vegetation.
Okay, thank you. My third question is regarding cat containment laws, which you're going to all be hearing a lot about going forward. The Minister for Local Government acknowledges himself that it is something that has huge community support. I grew up in Dianella, and it was at the time pet dogs and stray dogs roamed the streets freely. They got knocked over by cars constantly, injured in fights. Some just ran away. They had puppies all the time, spread diseases. They pooped on neighbours' lawns and caused all sorts of problems. We have now a bigger population, a lot of density and busy roads. Can you imagine if we didn't have dogs contained now? It's really just not safe for cats out there. This isn't just about wildlife. It's actually, the RSPCA do not want cats roaming.
I do need a question, Ms Jack.
Do you understand, are you aware that the RSPCA says that the life expectancy of a cat that roams the streets freely, their life expectancy is 5 years less than a cat that's contained on a property?
Thank you. No, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But I'll get Mr Quirk to provide an update on where we're at with the cat containment.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. Yes, look, we're certainly aware that community expectations in regards to cat management and cat containment have certainly changed. We're aware that we need to review our local law, and we're already researching what's working and what isn't working across the state and across the country as well. We will be reviewing the local law. The Cat Act is also being reviewed in 2024. So there is some work to be done, and the city's working hard to understand community sentiment so that we can make sure that any local law review is practical and effective from an enforcement perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Ms Jack. That's all I have on my list. Have I missed anyone? If not, thank you everyone for your patience. We got through that quite well. I'll now go on to item 8, which is application for leave of absence. Councillor Ferranti has requested a leave of absence as noted in the agenda. Are there any other requests for leave of absence, councillors? Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You caught me off guard, but I do need to do this one. The 24th to the 28th of April, please.
Thank you. If there's no other indications, I'll ask for a move and a seconder for those. Move Councillor Hatton, seconder Councillor Kristovich, and just a show of hands, please, councillors. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item 9, confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held on the 7th of March 2023. Move Councillor Olo, seconded Councillor Sandri, and a show of hands, please, councillors. That is unanimous. Thank you. Announcements by the presiding member. I do have one this evening. It's a pretty big one. Tonight I'd like to acknowledge our CEO, Stuart Jardine. On the 9th of March, after 16 years of dedicated service to the City of Stirling, our Chief Executive Officer, Stuart Jardine, has tendered his resignation at the City effective from the conclusion of his current contract on the 4th of April 2024. For those wondering, it's part of a contract that it does take a 9-month process, so that's why it's early. Stuart has a distinguished career in the local government sector spanning more than 40 years. He is widely recognised as one of the highest performing local government CEOs nationally. In fact, I often talk about it if I ever travel interstate with Stuart and go to Canberra with other local governments. It is like, honestly, going to another state with a rock star in the local government sector. Stuart's commitment to local government was acknowledged in 2017 when he was awarded a Public Service Medal for his service. Council have also recognised Stuart's strong leadership, outstanding performance through 6 consecutive contract renewals during his tenure, making him the longest standing Chief Executive Officer of the City of Stirling. Under Stuart's leadership, the City has emerged as a sector leader, regularly winning awards for excellence in the delivery of projects and services, as well as being used as an exemplar in governance and planning by the State Government. His calm and proactive leadership has seen the City through multiple achievements and challenges, including the City's highest ever community satisfaction rating of 94% in 2022. The $100 million Scarborough Foreshore redevelopment, including the amazing Scarborough Beach Pool. His advocacy and lobbying resulting in funding for projects such as Stevenson Avenue Extension and trackless tram projects as part of the Stirling City Centre, the Mirrabooka bus station redevelopment, and many, many more. The election of the City's first popularly elected Mayor. Navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, developing and implementing the City's $43.7 million stimulus package to support the community. 8 consecutive gold awards for the City's annual report from the Australasian Reporting Awards. And of course, who could forget his 2 Guinness Book World Records. Stuart has enormous credibility and respect from both councillors and employees at the City and within our community and the wider local government sector. He has worked tirelessly for our City during his tenure with tremendous results and will leave very big shoes for us to fill at the City of Stirling. So on behalf of Council, I'd like to thank you, Stuart, for your outstanding commitment, your leadership, your support and your friendship during your impressive tenure as CEO. We all, on behalf of the community, wish you the very best as you embark on your next challenge. But it's not over, so let's get back to work. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, with your indulgence, given there's significant public interest in item 13.1 and it's currently sitting at the end of the report and we still have several people here, can I suggest we bring it forward to the start of the meeting? Good. So those, and I will note as they leave, as Councillor Santry wasn't here at the start of the meeting, she has declared an impartial interest in this one on 13.1, as she is an alternative member of JDAP and may have to have representation on JDAP. So we have Councillor Migdale, Councillor Sandry and Councillor Reid leaving the chamber. For those members of the gallery, while they're leaving, these councillors are the community representatives or the council representatives who sit on the decision-making body, so they're prohibited from being involved in any discussion regarding the item under the JDAP rules. Thank you. We have brought it forward, so I'll now ask for a mover for item 13.1. Councillor Ferranti.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative recommendation for the council to consider on top of the recommendations already provided by the planning team.
Yeah, and if you could read that
to
out.
Schedule 2 of Part 9, Clause 67, 2M and N of the Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Regulations 2015, the development height will impact on the character and the context of the residential area, which is a heritage protection area with a maximum height of 2 stories. The development is not consistent with the streetscape and will impact on the amenity of the local area. I'd like to move that we add this in so the people have a voice against it.
You're welcome to move it in. Thank you. I think that was a bigger clap than Mr Collins got. And I have a seconder here. The Deputy Mayor is seconding that. Is there anyone opposed? In that case, I'm happy to put that motion. And I think that's everyone. We've only got 9 left. Yep. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now call back in the 3. For those who've been here tonight, we obviously have your details, so we will give you some more information regarding the process from here. So you'll hear from the City. We'll just take a minute while we have our councillors come back in the room. We will get started and ask councillors. I understand that 12.1 CF1 is to be pulled out, the Karrinyup Secondary by Councillor Kristovich. Are there any other items you wish to pull out? Councillor Hatton?
Yes, Mr Mayor, could I pull out 12.1 DS1, thank you?
On childcare?
Yes, thank you.
There's no other items. Noting if when Councillor Reid comes back in, I will ask her if she wants to pull. Oh, there she is. Councillor Reid, is there any items you want to pull out? Just to let you know, so we have DS1, the childcare, and we have CF1, Karrinyup, that are currently pulled out.
Just have one question for 12.1 DS3, please.
I'll pull that one out. Thank you. And we'll go to the first one of those. So 12.1 DS1, the local planning policy. Councillor Migdal, Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'd like to move the committee's recommendation. Thank you.
And is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Kristovich, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Hatton, you're opposed?
For purpose of debate.
Yep. Welcome to be opposed. So I will go to you, Councillor Migdal.
Thanks. This item was discussed robustly at committee. I don't have any further comment at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Kristovich, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I just think that the report is quite detailed, and I think that it's offering a good mix of alternatives in terms of emphasising the issues that childcare centres have created in the past, and will give us a stronger framework to work with. So I think it's heading in the right direction, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hatton.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, there has been robust debate on this. We've been discussing childcare centres for quite some years now. The review is a very, very good review. Well done to city officers. I will be voting for it, but I just want to get my point across probably for about the fourth or fifth time now about traffic assessments at childcare centres. I want it to be on record that I don't believe the traffic assessments that are currently being applied are necessarily improving the amenity of areas. Some of the intents in the policy changes are talking about increased landscaping, decreasing noise, and those things are very good. They're only minor changes because the policy on childcare centres with the City of Stirling is very good. But when it comes to traffic, I find it very difficult to support assessments that talk about volumes of traffic going along local distributor roads. I use that word volume. When the volume might be 3,000, the capacity holding of traffic might be 3,500 to 7,500 cars. That volume could be going through over a 24-hour period. It could be going through over a 12-hour period. That doesn't matter. But when you have a childcare centre that is proposed to be developed on a single lane distributor road that may have islands at the point where the childcare centre is, with small roundabouts that buses can't even traverse properly, and they slow down, stop, and have difficulty getting around, including large vehicles like rubbish trucks. The point I'm making is that the traffic assessments are all about volume, but not about site-specific traffic congestion and traffic delays. Now, I've been a great supporter in my time with community representation on decreasing congestion, decreasing delays for mums and dads and workers who need to get to a destination with the shortest possible time and in a safe way. The traffic assessments, I'll say probably again, over 2 years I've brought this up, to me they are not adequate. But I'll go along with the policy and the intent and the changes, and I will vote for it because it's a very robust policy for childcare centres to lead us into the future, such as we will advocate for them to be built on corridors and in urban places where we need to have population built up. We will allow them on distributor roads, but again, site-specific, some distributor roads where they're located or proposed to be located are not suitable. So I don't know that that will be addressed in the next time a childcare centre comes up. I will say that most childcare centres do have a good outcome with traffic, but there are some that possibly will not. So when we come to look at a report in future on a childcare centre in my ward, in the Hamsley ward, I'll be looking very closely about traffic congestion and traffic time delays and so forth. And I'll vote accordingly, and I'll bring up the relevant issues for the people in my ward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've got you, Deputy Mayor. I'll get Mr. Rodich. He's indicating he'd just like to make a comment to acknowledge your comments.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Haddon. Councillor Haddon, one of the objectives of the policy is to ensure that childcare centre has a minimal impact on traffic volumes and the local network, as well as the safety of the local network. So that is a consideration on any of our assessments under the objectives as part of their assessment submission. The applicant will be required to provide a traffic impact statement or a traffic impact assessment as part of that proposal. I understand where you're coming from in what is said in those assessments by private traffic engineers, but our city's engineering team do carry out full reviews of those, and as part of our planning assessment we must make sure that it does satisfy that objective of having that minimal impact on the local road network and the safety. So those matters you discuss are understood, and they will be considered as part of any future assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Ree, you're next.
Thank you. Before I make a comment, is there any reason why this can't be held over, please?
Mr. Rodich?
Through Councillor Reid, no. It could be held over if Council aren't happy with it, but it was voted unanimously last week at committee.
I do have a lot of concerns, and I do realise that the committee thought that there was no issue, but could I also have a comment, please, and my apologies that I can't find it on me. The number of childcare centres that, it was a question on notice, childcare centres that have been approved by the city and by JDAP, please, and how many have been refused?
It's been answered. Yeah, okay. We'll just...
Through Mr. Mayor, Councillor, I don't have that answered right now. But
yeah, we'll have to...
I had asked it, and I know it's there somewhere, but for whatever reason I couldn't find it yesterday. There was something like 24 or something childcare centres approved, and majority were approved by the City of Stirling staff, not by JDAP, and only one refused. And that does concern me when I look at some of the issues. I'm also very concerned with the word discretion. I know it's raised in 13.2, which I don't think it's while we're trying to sort it out, one of the main reasons that childcare centres get approved is because of the discretion. And the discretion is what upsets the community, but gets approved by the officers. And I don't think we go far enough with the word discretion. So I think that is still an issue. When I look at the opening hours on page 12, the noise and the traffic are not taken into consideration, really, when it comes to the opening hours. And I note that there's no change in the advertised policy, which is also a major issue. One of the main reasons, too, is the fact that when this was actually went out for advertising, which was on page 15, it was 19th of January to 9th of February. School holidays, people are away. I mean, the council did make a comment before about not having things over Christmas. This has seriously impacted the community, not only by the people who want a childcare centre, but people who want a childcare centre where they can drop off children safely, not have to put up with a whole lot of traffic congestion, do UEs, all sorts of things that are going on with these. They didn't get to make a comment either about wanting it. And I question the fact that in this report, it says 15 submissions of no comment. How do you make a submission of no comment? Could I have that answer, please?
Ms. Shears?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's not an error. It actually is when the anyone participating in the survey goes through our website process, they actually select the no comment box. We're currently looking at other ways that we can try and get some additional feedback.
Well, I don't know if people making a no comment is justification to keep going. I find that a little bit odd. I find it odd that 35 submissions, that we would have a lot more had it been at appropriate time. And I really am concerned. I mean, I think I'll have to put a notice of motion up to stop having them in school holidays, like we had to say, don't have it over Christmas, because this is really impacting upon the neighbourhood. And I will not be supporting
I will
this.
get some comments on the advertising time. I think it's really important to note it's easy to find plenty of times in the year when you can't do it, and we wouldn't be able to advertise at all. Ms. Shears?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we did consider that as part of our scheduling for advertising this application. However, because it was extending into February, we felt there was sufficient time for people to write in and be part of this process. We also individually wrote to every single person who had objected to previous applications of childcares through the city.
Councillor Ree?
I still stand by the fact that I don't think they should be held on school holidays. With regard to the amenity of the area, there's no change in the policy. That is one of the biggest problems. You've got a house and then you've got a great big 3-storey building with 101 bins that end up all over the street and wind, and then you've got garbage trucks trying to go over things. It's just inappropriate, and I don't think that's been addressed. Also, the other issue with the new childcare centres that have gone up by certain companies, they're black fences like prisons. Is that what the children want? Is that what parents want, for their children to go to something that has got black fences?
You'd have to address that to the childcare owner, Councillor.
Well, no. Well, I'm talking about the amenities, the amenity of the area. We're trying to make people have 2 or 3 trees, street trees in their front yard, and then all of a sudden they've got this great big black fence, wire fence, where syringes and anything else, broken glass, can go through. And it has happened in other ones. I don't know how many are here.
It's a stretch.
No. Have you been down there and actually seen them, Mr Mayor?
Why don't we keep on
This
local
still
planning
comes back
policy
to
childcare premises?
It still comes back to the amenity of the area, of which the policy there says there's no change. I feel that there should be a change. You ended up with a great big huge car park, the landscaping is less than it should, and there's no buffer. And that is one of the biggest problems. And when we go to the traffic issues with the childcare centre and the safety issues, years ago when the planning section used to write a report, there was an area there from the our traffic people, from infrastructure, used to make a comment. Then there was also a comment made by community safety about what was going on in the area and what they found. That's all gone. The only traffic report now is the developers. It's not in their best interest to sit there and go, oh no, there's only 10 cars, once a week. They're not going to make that. They're going to make it sound like it's good. So that concerns me, that we still just rely on the traffic report by the developers. With regard to the waste management,
Let's get clarification, because that's not correct. So, Mr. Rodich?
it is. We don't.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Reid, going back to the amenity considerations, as part of the new policy, there was significant development of criteria around amenity and impact on amenity. Now, the line you talk about in the report about no change, that is no change to the advertised policy due to submissions received. There was significant change in the policy before it went out for advertising in terms of putting criteria around amenity impacts and how those are considered. So there's been significant work in that. The comment in this report about no change is in regards to from the submissions of the consultation. So there was a lot of effort put in by the officers about putting criteria around amenity and having an amenity impact assessment. That's what council requested last year, and that's what we did. In terms of traffic considerations, as I said, yes, it is up to the applicant to submit the traffic impact statement or the assessment, but we have a well-qualified engineering team who carry out an audit of all those traffic reports as part of development applications and make their own comment in respect to that. And then from a planning point of view, we're going to make sure, as I raised to Councillor Hatton previously, that the development satisfies the objectives, and one of those relates to traffic and its impact on the local area.
Now, Councillor Reid, just as you're about to start.
Clarifying the no
you got
change
30
to the
seconds.
advertising. Thank you. I'm still concerned that how this policy can be tightened up to ensure that the JDAP listen, and I don't think it does. And I'm still concerned about the discretion in there, because the City of Stirling staff have improved more more childcare centres, and some of them don't even end up in a report, which we've seen with Hale Road. So I still don't think this is strong enough for JDAP. I'm still concerned about the discretionary use, and I don't think it's tight enough to actually give more confidence to the people in the community. However, I do acknowledge that it is a lot better than what we had before, and I appreciate that the staff have listened to both councillors and the community in trying to address it. And my apologies when it said no change. I thought you hadn't changed anything when I read some of it.
Thanks, Councillor Reid. I have the Deputy Mayor indicated.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And thank you to through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Roderick. Thank you for that traffic summation. Yes, the developer does put in a traffic assessment, which is also definitely checked by our city engineers, as is community safety, etc., on most of our DAs. Of the 33 total childcares that are operational, give or take, that are obviously approved and operational within the city, there has been no complaints once they're operational by anyone. And granted, there has been many objections prior to a daycare centre, childcare centre being installed when it goes out to public comment. But clearly, those apprehensions or perceptions of what could and hypothetically could or would or will happen, they haven't come to fruition. There has been no complaints, I repeat, zero, after a childcare centre is operational. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think there's any other indication, so I'll go to Councillor Migdale to close debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, I would like to raise the point that committee robustly debated this item and were unanimous in the outcome. Now, I've heard no comments. I've heard issues around not on school holidays, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, half of the consultation period was not on school holidays. I know this because I have a child who goes to school. It was not on school holidays. So there was adequate time for anybody who felt like they wanted to give feedback on this to give their feedback on this. It went out for public consultation. No comments in my mind when I have a look at anything advertised on any website and I don't comment, it's because I'm there to get information. There's nothing I particularly agree or disagree with. I want to get information. So I disregard that as being for or against. It's somebody simply noting the information. Finally, the thing to remember is this policy for childcare premises review is a due regard document. It's a due regard document. It's not the law. It's what we as councillors have listened to our residents' feedback about making it better, making it safer, making it more user-friendly. We now have a policy that everybody's commented on and said that this is what they want to be our policy. But being due regard, it doesn't have to be adhered to by JDAP. JDAP can decide whatever JDAP decides. This is simply a policy outlining what we would hope they will decide. We are trying to guide better decision making, but we certainly don't control that step of the equation. I 100% support committee's recommendation to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, that closes debate. Move Councillor Migdale, seconded Councillor Kristovich. I will put that item to the vote. Thank you, councillors. And that motion is carried with Councillor Reid voting against. Should be recorded. That's it. That's now correct. But the motion is carried. I'll now go to item 12.1 CF1. It's been put out by Councillor Kristovich. Councillor Migdale, as chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will move to Councillor Kristovic for his alternative recommendation.
Thank you. Your motion, councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. So I've got an alternative recommendation. If that could be put up onto the screen, I can read that out. Basically, what it says is, number one, that council notes the outcomes of engagement for the Karrinyup Secondary Centre planning framework, and number two, that council notes the outcomes of the engagement for the Karrinyup Secondary Centre planning framework will be considered in the preparation of local planning scheme number 4 and or future precinct structure plan. And the reason is to support the commentary on the report that the Karrinyup Secondary Centre planning framework will be further considered as part of the preparation of local planning scheme number 4, with the consideration given to the outcomes of the engagement undertaken to date.
Thank you. And seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Is there anyone opposed to that? If not, I'll put that item to the vote. Just, sorry, councillors, could I have a show of hands for this one? Where? Down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And that is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's just been brought to my attention. Apologies, I jumped. So I will go now to item 12.1 DS3. That has been pulled out. I'll ask for Councillor Migdal as chair of the committee to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I will move committee's recommendation, please, noting that there is one question.
Thank you. For East Rosalie, is there a seconder for that motion? Deputy Mayor Proud has seconded. Councillor Ree, you just have a question?
Yes, please. I tried to go through it and I did sort of ask about the Nookabarra Creek, the Osborne Park drain. It was at the back there and it got sort of put in, but it wasn't supposed to in the redevelopment. It was supposed to stay, some land was supposed to stay to keep that creek space. It's called Nookabarra Creek here, but it's Osborne Park drain up there.
I think it's called a swale there.
Well,
but let me.
It's sort of moved, but it wasn't supposed to be developed on in the whole plan, and I think the staff are actually working on the whole one from Girraween to the ocean, but I just couldn't find it.
Are you happy to take that offline and for the officers to get back to you?
Yeah, I was just concerned that if we redevelop this on top of it, we might.
No, they definitely won't be redeveloping on top of that. I think it's not.
Because we have lost it a bit on Twyford Road up here.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Rodich?
Through Mayor Councillor Reid, this report relates to lots that have been created. There's no impact on the swale. The swale sits outside of that to the west of these lots.
The fact that with that subdivision, some of the people were wanting to sue the council because they said of concrete cancer because the water had gone underneath and it hadn't been properly directed. That's all. I was just making sure that we weren't going to be in the same line.
So we're comfortable for this to go ahead and we'll certainly get you more information on how that works in. So there's no one opposed to this. Move Councillor Migdal, second to Councillor Proud. I will put that to the vote. We're back online. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And I will now ask Councillor Migdal, as chair of the Planning and Development Committee, if you could move the balance of the reports, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the balance of reports.
Thank you. Second to Councillor Perkov. And I'll put that to the vote now. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to the Director Council items. We've already dealt with item 13.1, so we'll start for item 13.2. The proposed submission to the Department of Lands and Heritage on the use and application of that magic word we all love, discretion, on development applications. Do I have a mover of a motion, please? Councillor Sandri.
Thanks. Just a clarification. Just one of the items in the one that we moved on block was for Seven Hills, where the property developer is Sutherly, which is the development manager for Tamala Park Regional Council. I just want to confirm that there's no impartiality that's required to be declared by TPRC members, or if that's just covered because we...
I wouldn't think so,
Okay.
Not for that item. I think we're, yeah. While you're up, did you want to do 13.2, Councillor Sandri? Is there any councillor who'd like to move 13.2, please? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kristovich, is there anyone opposed? Councillor Sandri. Thank you. So is there anyone opposed who wants to debate it? No, well, all I'll do is I'll just indicate, if we've got a mover and a second but no one wants to debate it, then I'll just put it and you can vote against it. That's the easy way to do it. It's not talk for the sake of it. We'll put that to the vote. Thank you, and I think we're one off. That's it. Thank you, and that motion is carried with Councillor Crowdo, Ferrante, Hatton, Kristovich, Olo, Perkoff, Proud and myself voting for. Against Councillor Lagan, Migdal, Ree and Sandri. Thank you. I'll go to item 13.3, change of meeting date for council. This was due to the council agenda with the Australian Local Government Conference, and then they changed the date, which is us trying to be proactive, backfired. So we now have to change that. Do I have a mover of a motion? Councillor Perkoff. Thank you. Move the officer's recommendation.
I do.
And Councillor Hatton seconding. Thank you. And I'll put that to the vote. Thank you, councillors. That motion is unanimous. Item 14, notice of motions for consideration. We'll go to the first one of those. Item 14.1, the proposed notice of motion from you, Councillor Lagan. Your motion?
Yes, I'm moving the recommendation on page 293. I just want to make a quick comment.
Sure. Is it?
Can I do that after the seconder or?
Councillor Sandra, are you seconding?
Yes, please.
A quick comment, Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, look, this is by way of attempting to get some activation on a large parcel of land that sits in Dianella and, without being unkind, is a bit unsightly. We've had, Councillor Sandra and myself have had a number of discussions with officers. I was contacted by the members of Discover Dianella today, who also recognised that this was on the agenda, and wanted just to make comment that a number of members in the community locally have also expressed an interest that that site be activated and the land used. It's not specifically about the shopping centre itself, it's mainly about the land and the shopping centre. We note there's been one development built at the back of the shopping centre, and it gives us an example of the activation, and that's what we're looking for, is continued activation.
Thank you. I will now go to... There's no debate on this item, it's just putting a motion forward. It's just that the Mayor writes, so it's not an item that needs debate. I was just giving Councillor Lagan a little bit of indulgence to grandstand. So I will now put that to the vote. Unless no one wants me to write, then we can debate it. Yeah. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. The next one is 14.2, proposed notice of motion by myself for the 3 Ocean site. A mover of a motion, Councillor Migdal, seconded Councillor Kristovich. Thank you. I will actually just quickly, with this one, rather than myself talk, ask Mr. Quirk to give a brief update, because it has been, just the motion itself has been quite successful in getting some action. Mr. Quirk.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, myself and the Director of Planning and Development, along with other officers, met with the owners of 3 Oceans, the member for Scarborough, the officer in charge of Scarborough Police, and the Department of Communities last Friday. And as a result, the fencing around the site has all been repaired over the weekend, so the site can no longer be accessed. The city also completely cleared the site yesterday, so all of the rubbish, litter and unfortunately syringes have been completely removed from the site. WA Police are now enforcing trespassing in a much more vigilant manner, and we've got the Department of Communities assisting us with anyone who may choose to sleep rough on the site. Having said that, there's no one sleeping rough on the site at the moment. So discussions were really positive last week. We've already seen some results on the site. We'll meet with 3 Oceans again in a couple of weeks' time to look at activation opportunities for the site, given the fact that development is still likely to be some years away.
Thank you, Mr. Quirk. Councillor?
Is the motion still required then?
Yes.
But the action's already being undertaken?
It hasn't. It's not finalised.
Okay.
Yeah. Happy to leave it, unless you'd like to oppose it. That's all right. So we'll put that one to the vote.
Mr Mayor, I did have a comment on that.
No, it's not open
It's
for
about 5 words.
Councillor, Deputy Mayor, what would you like to say?
Just that 2 people have been rehomed from that site
Thank you.
so far.
Yes. Oh, we're missing a vote now. Yes. See, that's why you shouldn't talk. You miss your vote. What's going on? They've just reset. Sorry, everyone, just go to your votes, make sure. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. The next notice of motion, item 14.3, proposed notice of motion from myself on street beggars at traffic lights. Move Councillor Kristovich, seconded Councillor Ferrante. Do you? What's your question, councillor?
I was just wondering whether you wanted to make a slight adjustment to the motion, only to the extent of seeking a meeting with the relevant minister as well as local members of Parliament and WA Police Force. I know you haven't included the minister, but I think that's probably the most pertinent part of that.
Happy to add in here. Yep. Thank you. And you're happy with that, Councillor Ferrante?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it will add a particular good value.
Thank you.
Mr Mayor?
Deputy Mayor, what?
Just quickly, we spoke about this briefly yesterday, and I wanted to add an intersection. You said the list isn't exhaustive, but I would like to add North Beach Road and Karrinyup Road intersection, median strip.
Happy to do that. And obviously that, whilst didn't form part of the motion, it was just to give an indication of some of the ones we know about. And let me be really clear, this certainly isn't, anything to try to move homeless people off the streets of the city of Stirling. This is about a concerted effort of street beggars at traffic lights that are threatening the public. Even last week in the news, we heard about a police officer, an off-duty police officer, getting assaulted at a set of traffic lights by one. A good indication of how concerted some of these efforts are is a lot of the clearing that happened at our 3 Ocean sites with those dozens and dozens and dozens of drug needles. Also had litterings of those street signs around of the group that's sat there. This is something we don't want to see in the city. Our residents don't feel safe. So we'll continue to ensure that we sort those intersections out. But any lists, if you want to talk to the officers after, can be added to this. So I'll now put that one to the vote. Thank you, and that is unanimous. Last one, 14.4, Councillor Ree, notice of motion.
Thank you. I'm happy to go to page 305 with the suggested alternative recommendation. The council, I don't know quite what that word is, receptivus or something. It's fixed there, okay.
I before E, except after C.
The information contained within this report regarding the management registration of cats. The council notes analysis of key consideration issues has commenced to directly inform reviews of both state government and the City of Stirling keeping control cats local law. Is there any date that we need to put on either one of those?
Let me just check, Mr Quirk.
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, we don't have a specific date for the statutory review from the state government, apart from knowing it's 2024. We are scheduled for the local law review in 2024, but we will likely start a form of community engagement in the next few weeks and months to start gathering information in preparation for that. So certainly this report seeks to provide a commitment to council that this local law review will be happening, but I think it's appropriate to leave it as 2024 at this stage.
Councillor?
Mr Mayor, do we need to, because the obviously the Minister of Local Government has a lot of things he wants to push through before the next election, do we need to actually write, for the Mayor to write to the Minister to make sure this stays on his list of legislation to be changed? Do you think that might be prudent of the council to make sure that, they're taking this seriously?
I think they are, and it's already been noted that it will happen. I'm happy to talk to Mr Quirk and take it offline and just mention it to them and get you a date.
And that's fine.
All right, and Councillor Hatton, you've seconded this one, so we'll put that one to the vote. Okay, we're missing a couple here. We've got Councillor Migdale and Councillor Ferrante. Looks like they were having a chat.
Having a chat.
That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 15, notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Councillors, is there any notice of motion you wish to raise now for the next meeting? If not, I'll continue on. Councillor Hatton, can you turn their mic off, please? I've got 16 questions by members of which due notice has been given. I have nil. 17 new business of an urgent nature. I have nil. I will now go to item 18, which is matters behind closed doors. We have got one confidential matter this evening to deal with. So shortly the live stream, after I move to go behind closed doors, will be turned off, and we will bid good night to those viewers at home. So you won't be turned back on because there's no meeting further on. So good night to you at home. And to the members of the gallery, we'll ask you to leave shortly. You are welcome to stay and come back in, but nothing will happen. So don't feel like you have to. Good night. Thank you. Bye. And so if I can, Councillor Godova, move it to go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Legand, seconded Councillor Ferrante. And just a show of hands. And that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone.